sign says on the outside, the cradle of Negro liberty. This particular Liberty Hall was built in 1923 by the Kingston Division of the Universal Negro Recruitment Association, which I have the pleasure of leading currently as their president. So this will be our centennial year for Liberty Hall, and an important year it shall be. Before we begin, in the spirit of the organization founded by the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah in 1914, I must observe rituals as written into our Constitution by our founders, which says, Princes shall come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto God. And I will ask you all to stand for the UNIA prayer. Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. God of the right, our battle's fight, be with us as of yore. Break down the barriers of might, we reverently implore. Stand with us in our struggles for the triumph of the right, and spread confusion ever o'er the advocates of might. And let them know that righteousness is mightier than sin, that might is only selfishness and cannot or ought not win. Endow us, Lord, with faith and grace and courage to endure the wrongs we suffer here apace, and bless us evermore. One God, one aim, one destiny. Please be seated. This is our first mass meeting for the new year, 2023, year of our Lord. We are happy to be here. It's been a long road back from COVID and from the constant Zoom meetings, but we're happy to get back face to face, and we're looking for a robust year of activities here and boosting of our membership. Today we have a very special guest who will address us in a few minutes. An old friend of mine, an old brother of mine. We're both alumni of the same alma mater. But what is interesting is that he is now the president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People in Baltimore, while I lead the Universal Negro Recruitment Association in Kingston. Now, these are both organizations with a long history between each other, and not always positive history, but in a new generation and in a new time, dealing with the same old problems. Let us hope that fraternity, brotherhood, and fellowship can blaze a new trail when it comes to the racial upliftment of our people. Right? Before we begin, I would like to invite the director of the Liberty Hall, our host for today, Ms. Anya Thompson, to bring welcome.
Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome to Liberty Hall and Universal Negro Recruitment Association for our first Sunday mass meeting. We are very honored to host this meeting and to host Reverend Kobi Little here today as the president of the NAACP in Baltimore. We are in the spirit of Marcus Garvey. Liberty Hall is a multimedia museum, a reference library, and you're sitting in Garvey Great Hall, where we actually offer a forum for organizations and entities alike to express their views, to come together, and to actually explore the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey and propagate them accordingly. So in light of that, and the spirit of that, it's only right to host both presidents of the NAACP in Baltimore and the Kingston Division of UNIA president here in Jamaica at this location, Garvey Great Hall, because it is, as I said, it provides that forum for Pan-Africanists, for nationalists, and for those that know that Marcus Garvey's philosophy and opinion can move not just the youth forward, but the nation forward. And I want to say thank you for joining us this evening, and looking forward to learning from both presidents. Take care.
There is a lot to be said about the history between Marcus Garvey William Eugene Burghardt Du Bois. Did I get that name right? It was William, right? W.E.B. Du Bois. But what is not often noted by Garveyite enthusiasts is that one of the first public platforms that Garvey spoke on was in 1917 in Harlem at the first silent protest held in America, I believe, which was hosted by the NAACP. Garvey had just come back from touring much of the United States, having been there since 1916, and he participated in that march, spoke on the platform, and that march was called in response to what is known as the East St. Louis riots, which sort of predated the Red Summer of 1919, but was tied up in the antagonism that black people and black communities were faced, whether by generating their own wealth, as was the case in Tulsa, Black Wall Street in 1921, or by the animosity towards black American soldiers returning from World War I in their uniforms and being discriminated against by this sort of white supremacist idea generated a lot of times by the poorer classes of white people. But that was the first platform that sort of brought Garvey's personality to public attention and his skill as an orator. Certainly within 2 years he was billing himself as the greatest Negro orator of all time and selling out sold-out arenas, churches and halls all along the U.S. East Coast and into the South and even across the border into Canada. But we should not forget that it was on this platform created by the NAACP that he was able to lend his voice to the racial struggles that were being faced by black people, not only in America, but across the globe at his time. And the rest, as they say, is history. It's just very sad that in his actions for us as a people to realize our own self-determination, Garvey was very vocal and critical about organizations that were either started by or funded by persons from outside of our race and outside of our community. And this is one of the criticisms he levied against the NAACP, and to which their relief leaders reacted. But he did have a point. And as he later said in Canada, speaking about black people's need to emancipate themselves from mental slavery, he used the words, none but ourselves can free our minds, meaning our liberation has to be at our own hands. The British claim they emancipated us, but emancipation is not liberation. Liberation is your own self-actualization and realization of that universal gift of freedom and self-determination that should be the possession of every living sentient being in the universe. So today, looking back on over 100 years of history, but also noting the similarities in the times. A year after Garvey spoke on that NAACP platform, coming towards the end of World War I, the world went into an influenza pandemic known as the Spanish flu that ravaged the globe. Not dissimilar to what we have been facing recently and are still facing in terms of the COVID pandemic, which is another influenza pandemic. So the times are similar, and the need for us to pull together as a community, as a people, as a nation, as a race, to ensure our own survival, whether from a public health perspective or just from the fact that being minorities in some countries who face harsh discrimination, the very preservation of our culture and our very souls, sometimes is a real reality that's put on the line every day. During the COVID pandemic, we saw the emergence of the Black Lives Matter, which was in response to the brutality that black people have faced at the hands of the state in America through their agencies, whether the police or others in authority. And not even a worldwide pandemic could keep that bottle, could keep the cork on the bottle. It exploded, and it crossed the Atlantic Ocean and was active in places like London, where black people were pulling down the statues built to former slave owners. All in all, it added fuel to the fire of a growing movement to address the wrongs of the past and to bring justice and recognition to the descendants of those who were still being persecuted because of the lingering effects of racial discrimination and racial injustice. And that movement that I refer to is none other than the reparations movement. And it is the theme of our forum today, because it is something that, whether we are members of the UNIA or members of the NAACP, as woke black people, as they would say, or as conscious black people, as we say here in Jamaica, none of us can deny we are entitled to. Reverend Little, in my younger days, was one of the, when we were students at Johns Hopkins University, was one of the first young black leaders I ever heard speaking about reparations and black people's rights to reparations. And back then it was looked at as something radical. And Kobi was very much known as a radical person on the campus. Always talking all of that black stuff, and most of us were just there to do our schoolwork and get our degrees. But it evoked and it provoked in me something very profound. And it is amazing to see now, almost 30 years later, reparations as a movement becoming a real thing in the world. A few weeks ago, the Dutch government was forced to apologize for their role in the transatlantic slave trade. A couple months ago, going into last year, the University at Glasgow rolled out a reparations package which took the form of money to be spent on research in a collaboration between themselves and the University of the West Indies. Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., when it was discovered that they had traded in enslaved Africans in order to establish that university, Jesuit priests then came up with a policy that if you could prove your descendancy from any of these enslaved Africans, you were entitled to free tuition and a place at Georgetown. Princeton Seminary also followed suit. We see city councils in Chicago rolling out a plan of reparations in terms of home ownership or land distribution or grants towards home ownership in that state. The California State Legislature recently debated, did their research, and have on the table a reparations plan to roll out worth some hundreds of millions of dollars, if I am correct. It's happening. Our own government formed a reparations commission, which later became, in 2007, which later in 2016 became National Council on Reparation, which I have the pleasure of serving on as a member. There is a CARICOM Reparations Commission led by the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, Sir Hilary Beckles. The Bayesian government recently put out that they would be seeking reparations from the Drax family, one of the few families who owned plantations, who benefited and traded in chattel slavery and the trafficking of enslaved Africans, and who still, over successive generations for the past 2 centuries, have maintained properties in Barbados. That same family is responsible for what we know on the north coast in the parish of St. Anne's as the Drax Hall Estate, even though they sold that a few generations ago and it has traded between several hands. So I remind you of these things because as a young student in university, when I saw Reverend, then also a student himself, bringing up these issues and people treating it lightly, and even black people who did not see any real equity in it, did not really believe it possible. Look where we have reached today. And this would not have been possible without people like Reverend Little, not only lending their voice and advocating for it, but introducing the concept to the minds of black people who are oftentimes a little bit too ignorant about their own history and the truth of what is due to them. That being said, let me now invite Reverend Little to address you all on the issue of reparations and other projects that he's working on, particularly in the area of public health. Please welcome.
We give thanks for this day and for this opportunity, and I extend to you blessings of peace, power, and love. Let me begin with a question. What court or spiritual tradition anywhere in the world would consider it justice to pay a thief, trafficker, rapist, murderer, exploiter, and invader to stop those trespasses, while they continue to neglect and gaslight those whom they have trespassed against, yet then leave those who have been trespassed against broken and uncompensated for the crimes visited against them? None would consider this justice. And yet this is the reality of African people on planet Earth. And so we answer the call for justice with a call for reparations. I want to thank the very Honorable Stephen Golden, who is a leader, a thought leader, an organizational leader, one who has been committed for decades to the struggle, the fight for justice, and for a free and empowered African world. I listened as Brother Golding recounted his observations of the early days in Baltimore. But I must tell you that Stephen was not only an observer, but he was an active participant. And I'm very proud to call him my friend and my brother. I have watched Stephen rise from being a foot soldier in the many campaigns that we had in Baltimore, to leading efforts for Black empowerment in New York City, and then here in Jamaica and across the African world. As I have traveled across the world and laid down, cast down my bucket to do the work that God has called, it has been a great joy to see Stephen come and visit me and contribute to that work, whether it was work in Baltimore or work in Selma, Alabama, or work in Tanzania in East Africa. And so I'm very delighted now to find that the whirlwind has brought me to Kingston, Jamaica, to be able to share and to support in the work that President Golding leads here today. It is a special treat and a joy to see Sister Simone after so many years and to again join in the struggle with you here. Not only do I want to thank Brother Golding and honor and recognize the tradition that he comes about, the tradition of his father and those who came before him, but I also must thank the UNIA for this invitation today, but moreover for the century of work that the UNIA has done to propel Black people forward in this world. It is an honor to stand here in Kingston, Jamaica, to stand here today at Liberty Hall and address you. And we affirm our theme for the day, umoja, unity. And I extend that with an affirmation in the Pan-African language, Kiswahili. And I say, tuko pamoja, we are together. We greet you today in the Pan-African tradition, in the tradition of justice and of righteous struggle. We greet you in the memory of the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey. We greet you in the tradition of Professor W.E.B. Du Bois, who was a founder of the NAACP. We greet you in the memory of Ida B. Wells, Queen Mother Ida B. Wells, who was a founder of the NAACP and a global citizen, one who campaigned after doing research all across the South to identify the cause of lynching. She campaigned around the world to bring attention to the American horror of lynching. I greet you in the memory of the Reverend William Henry Shepherd, an African-American minister who traveled to the Congo Free State to bring attention to the atrocities of King Leopold and the Belgians. We also, this afternoon, would like to speak the names of Queen Mother Moore, a prominent Garveyite in the United States who helped to continue the tradition of the UNIA. We call the name of Malcolm X, who was a son of a Garveyite. We call the name of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., who declared that America has written a check that has returned marked insufficient funds. And yes, Martin Luther King was calling for reparations in the 1960s. And we call the names of Bob Marley and Peter Tosh. We call the names of these people because their works and their messages did so much to arouse Black consciousness around the African world, and also to call for reparations. There is much to be said about the history that demands reparations for African people, why we deserve reparations, and who should pay reparations. But today, I will only briefly touch on these issues, because I would like to focus my energy today on the theme, get ready for reparations. Get ready for reparations. As we consider we must ask these questions. And I'll leave these questions open-ended, because I truly believe that all of us must continue to contribute to the discourse, to the body of thought that will propel us forward in our quest for reparations. Reparations to what end? Reparations for whom? Reparations from whom? What should reparations look like? What should we do with reparations? How do we prepare ourselves for reparations? How do we work together once reparations come? Who decides how reparations should be used? My worldview is one of global citizenship. I believe that the people of this planet, humanity, we must be concerned with justice and the plight of human beings beyond our own economic, ideological, ethnic, geopolitical, cultural, and racial boundaries. That is to say that all around the world we're in the same boat. And if humanity is to continue successfully and sustainably, there must be those of us who identify as citizens of this planet, who identify people as being more important than power, who believe that even if there is a necessity for government, power should always rest with the people. In today's world, in today's global order, we see corporations exerting themselves and their dominance on the global scene. We see governments making decisions for the billions of us who live on this planet. And somehow, often, the needs of the people of this planet, the hopes, the aspirations, the desires of the most vulnerable seem to be swept aside so that the powerful can continue to concentrate power in their own hands. It doesn't take much to look at the billionaires of the world to see that it is a great injustice for the vast majority of the wealth on this planet to be concentrated in the hands of a few thousand people, while many, many, many millions of us, billions of us, struggle to meet the daily demands of life on earth. But as we consider global citizenship, as we consider the brotherhood and sisterhood of nations, we know that in order for African people to participate fully in the conversation, we must be fully free. We must be fully empowered. We must be in a position to give our very best. And so I see no conflict in being an adherent to global citizenship and also being a Pan-African. I believe, and I think you will agree with me, that African people have always been a gift to humanity. It is the contributions of African people, intellectual, cultural, the blood, the sweat, the toil of African people, that in so many ways has provided the lifeblood and the life wealth that propels all human activity in the 21st century. And now there is a need to make African people whole as a matter of justice. There is a demand that Africa be compensated and repaired, made whole for all that was stolen from us, all that was exploited, all that was done unjustly to us. We'll never bring back the lives that have been lost to colonialism and slavery and white supremacy. But there yet must be justice delivered to our people. When we lift African people, we will lift all of humanity. And we will equip humanity to be its very best in pursuit of a sustainable future. Before we get to the focus of this conversation, get ready for reparations. Let me affirm that we deserve reparations. African people deserve reparations around the world. And European governments must pay reparations. The corporations that benefited from colonialism and neo-colonialism, the corporations that set up banana republics, the corporations that assassinated African freedom fighters, the corporations that have sent African people into the forest, into the orchards, into the field, held us on plantations and sent us into the mine, they must pay for the exploitation of our people and our resources. I stand here today to affirm that not only must the governments and corporations pay, but the estates of those individuals who led the atrocities against African people, they must also pay for the crimes committed against African people. The justice for those crimes, we call that reparations. Reparations is an apology, but it is also a commitment to cease the activities which warrant reparations in the first place. Let me say that again. Reparations demand that those trespassers acknowledge and apologize for the crimes that they have committed against African people. Second, it requires and demands that all activities and all of the extensions of the activities which cause hurt and harm to African people, they must cease. We can no longer be gaslighted and told that what we experienced didn't happen or wasn't really bad. We can no longer accept apologies when the perpetrators of crimes against us continue to perpetuate aspects of white supremacy. And so after an acknowledgement, after an apology, after a cessation of all hostility, we expect compensation, which will be used to heal the trauma, to recoup the lost wealth, and to equip us to move forward with sustainable development across the African world. 3 points that I would like to make today. And I pray that each one of these points will be received and remembered by each person who gives this talk in audience. We're grateful for all who have assembled here at Liberty Hall today. We're grateful to all who are watching on the live stream. And we're grateful yet for those who will encounter the recording in days to come. The first point that we pray that you will receive and remember. As we pursue reparations, we must be intentional about building unity throughout the African world. The second point, as we get ready for reparations, in addition to the work of advocating for reparations, we must do the work to prepare ourselves to receive reparations. And third, we must, across the African world, agree that the purpose of reparations is not individual enrichment, nor is it to equip us with the resources to compete in the existing exploitative economic and governance systems. The purpose of reparations, we must agree, should be to heal, empower, and sustainably develop the African world. 3 points. So if you will, give me a few minutes to go a little deeper on each point. As we pursue reparation, we must be intentional about building unity throughout the African world. Reparations must unite us at all levels, from the family level to the entire African world. And by the African world, I mean those spaces around planet Earth occupied by African God said it doesn't matter where you come from. If you're a black man or woman, you're an African. And so we recognize that the African world is certainly the continent of Africa and the people therein. But the African world is also everywhere. In Kingston, in Baltimore, in London, in Rio, wherever African people are, in Guangzhou, wherever African people are, that is the African world. And reparations must unite us at all levels in the African world. If we allow reparations to divide African people to the point that it hampers our ability to receive and or maximize the benefits of reparations, then we have failed ourselves. At this point in history, we should all be clear that white supremacists accomplished what they accomplished in part by brute force, in part by lies and deception, and in part by dividing African people. The African proverbs teach us that we are more powerful united. One proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I'm reminded of the wisdom of African American church mothers and fathers who would say, walk together, children. Walk together, children. We must, as we pursue reparations, do it in a way that builds umoja, that builds unity. We must also use the clean glass approach. Malcolm X recounts how his mentor told him, you see people or organizations out there who are leading our people astray. There's no need to attack those organizations or those persons directly, but we ought to just show them the clean glass, because our people are always wise enough to choose clean water to drink, not to choose dirty water. We must use this clean glass approach to reject so-called reparations organizations that advocate for reparations at the expense of unity in the African world. One of the motivating factors for white supremacists, and one of the lies that they use, is the lie of scarcity. What I love about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, whether you're Christian or not, Jesus' teachings are important African wisdom teachings. The scriptures tell us that there were 5,000 men plus women and children assembled on the mount. And yet, with only a few fish and a few loaves of bread, Jesus was able to feed the 5,000. Now, some would have approached, and women and children, some would have approached that dilemma and said, we don't have enough. Only my people can eat. Only the people with money can eat. Only the people who have this knowledge can eat. But Jesus approaches the situation of love and with a mindset of abundance. And somehow, miraculously, with just a few fish and a few loaves, everyone was left full. Now, I think that the miracle there is not that Jesus clapped hands and did some magic on a plate and turned it magically into more. I think Jesus' approach of love caused all of those black people to love one another enough to share out of what they had. And as we approach reparations, we must see reparations as an opportunity for collective elevation. My neighbor is not a threat to me when it comes to reparations. Sisters and brothers who immigrate to the country where I live are not a threat to the people who've been in that country for generations when it comes to reparations. Barbados is not a threat to Jamaica when it comes to reparations. Nigeria is not a threat to Afro-Canadians when it comes to reparations. We should not see each other as rivals and competitors for reparations. We should see strength in our collective unity as a way to compel the reparations that are due to us all. In addition to advocating for reparations, we must do the work to prepare ourselves to receive reparations. It is well established that when we, in the past, have been beneficiaries of windfall, many times, money was used to divide us. And we ended up in worse positions than before the windfall came. And so now, we must be intentional in building our capacity to receive reparations. We must be intentional in building our capacity to deploy and invest reparations. We must build our capacity to be good stewards of the resources that are delivered to us as compensation for all the wrongs that have been visited on our people. Spiritually, yes, spiritually, we must prepare ourselves to receive the blessing of reparations and to use that blessing in a way that is pleasing in the sight of our Creator and of our ancestors. We must build the capacity in our organizations to be effective stewards of reparative resources. This is our obligation to ourselves, to our ancestors, and our future generations. Our efforts in compelling reparations, in managing reparations, and in investing reparations must be democratic. The power must be vested in the people and not in a strong man or a big man or a king or a dictator. Our efforts must not only be democratic, but our efforts must be ethical and they must be transparent. And finally, we must agree that the purpose of reparations is not individual enrichment, nor is it to equip us with the resources to compete in the existing exploitative economic and governance system. In other words, we don't need reparations to become better capitalists and exploiters of our own people. In other words, we don't need reparations so that we can buy in to the giant corporations that advance neocolonialism. We don't need reparations to be a part of an economic system that destroys our planet and has more regard for profit than people. We don't need reparations so that our governments can become war makers and colonizers. We need reparations so that we might advance justice, sustainable development, and the beloved community that is heaven on earth. The purpose of reparation must be to heal, yes, heal, and empower and sustainably develop the African world. As I said before, reparations are not about individual enrichment. We believe in Ubuntu. I am because we are. I am because of those who have come before me. I am because of those who will come after me. Christians look at that like this. I must love God who created me, and I must love my neighbor as myself. Because there is not the individual without the community. So we must embrace a collective approach to reparations, and not a simply individualistic approach. This is the African way. This will require a thorough assessment of the practices of African people. After hundreds of years of colonization and oppression, we have acquired some rather bad habits. And to quote our Lord, we must be clear that the master's tool can never be used to dismantle the master's house. And I'll take it a step further and say, we certainly cannot use the master's tool to build our own house. So as we do this thorough assessment of our practices, of our religious bodies, of our organizations and governments, we must identify that which is counterproductive and should be eliminated from our practice. That which is useful should be accentuated, and that which is lacking should be addressed. This is the work that we must do to get ready for reparations. We ought to be intentional, sisters and brothers, about avoiding the traps set by the trespasser. African people, we ought to know that the devil is like a beast going to and fro, seeking whom it might devour. We know that white supremacists do not want to see African people rise. And so we must be intentional about seeing, about identifying, and about neutralizing the traps that colonizers and invaders and haters set to cause our demise. Lest some people think that reparations means that everyone has to be the same and do what only the leader says. I want to respect the symbiotic tension of the individual and the collective. Ubuntu is not a theory that says there is no individual. It says that the individual is inextricably linked to the collective. So we need individual genius. We need individual creativity. We need individual thought. It just can't come at the expense of collective well-being. We get ready to receive reparations. We ought to be clear that the point of reparations is not that we hit the ladder. Reparations is not your extra cash in your pocket because you got a bonus. Reparations is a sacred injection of resources intended to heal our people, to secure our people, and to propel our people forward in advancement. The point of reparations must be to repair the damage done by white supremacy, the damage done by slavery, colonization, and corporate exploitation. Self-hate, ignorance, impoverishment, poor health, lost competitiveness, lost wealth, crushed dreams, disconnectedness, disrupted spiritual identity, and self-concept are all matters to be addressed by reparations. Reparations, when we receive them, not a reason to relax. Reparations are a reason to lean in and work harder to further the advancement of African people. Reparations are not called for drunkenness on the eve of reconstruction. But reparations are the fuel that gives us the power to reconstruct the African world. We must use reparations. We must recommit to do the work of sustainable development of our community. I recall President Golding, the excitement and the commitment to building the African world at the end of slavery in so many countries. I recall the excitement and the fervor of the Garveyite movement in the early 20th century to build the African world. I recall the commitment to justice and sustainability that came out of liberation of African nations in the 1960s. And yet, somehow we have been lulled into complacency. Somehow we have lost our way again. Somehow we have failed to honor the contributions of those who have marked this struggle for justice and liberation. And so now we must prepare ourselves for reparations and get ready to do the important work that is ahead of us. If we are to accomplish what we will, we must prepare ourselves and get ready for reparations. So as I bring this brief message to an end, every good organizer must offer a call to action. And so I offer this call to action to all those who hear this message. Thank you, my sister. To all those who hear this message, young, not so young, and even to our elders. Three things that every African person must hear and respond to. And I'm delighted to offer this call of action today on January 8th at Liberty Hall, the home of the UNIA. One, we must embrace the cause of reparations and commit to doing our part to bring reparations to fruition in our lifetime. Reparations in our lifetime, that is a commitment that each African person must make. The second call to action is that each of us must identify the organization or organizations that we will join and the specific work that we will do to create the reparative reality. Each of us must commit to supporting and joining an organization, finding our place in the struggle, and be clear on the work that we must do. And then, third call to action for every African person, whether today you find yourself in Accra, or Addis Ababa, or Cape Town, or Rio, or Panama City, or New York, or Port of Spain, each of us, or Berlin, each of us must do everything that we can to get prepared, to get ready for reparation. We must prepare ourselves spiritually. We must prepare ourselves in terms of our knowledge base. What are the issues facing our people? What are the ways for us to invest our money that will be good stewardship and sustainable? We must do everything that we can to prepare ourselves, our families, our communities, our countries, and the African world to receive reparations. Three calls to action. If you came today wondering why reparations, we hope that we have answered your curiosity. But the price of having your curiosity answered is your commitment to reparations. Beyond these three individual calls, of action that we put forth to every African person, we also, today, Brother Golden, we make two organizational calls. President Kobi, come join me as we make these organizational calls. Today I stand here with the Honorable Stephen Golden, who is my brother, who is a leader of our people. And we are only two voices, but we issue these organizational calls today in a manner that is inclusive of all African people, men and women, young and old, geographic diversity, spiritual diversity. We invite all African people to answer these calls. The first organizational call that we make is a call for the formation of the African World Reparations Council, which must be composed of reparations advocates and organizations from around the African world, and the purpose of which is to promote unity in the pursuit of reparations and to share information, ideas, strategy, and lessons learned in the pursuit of reparations. And then, second, we call for the establishment of the recognition, credentialing, and admission of the African World Reparations Council and other diaspora bodies into the African Union and the regional bodies of the African world. Finally, we close with the words of the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Let us, in shaping our own destiny, set before us the qualities of human justice, love, charity, mercy, and equity. Upon such foundation, let us build the race. And I feel that God, who is divine, the Almighty Creator of the world, shall forever bless this race of ours. One God, one aim, one destiny. Peace, power, and love. Thank you, my sisters and brothers.
Thank you, Reverend Little. I don't think anybody could have said it better. What a place to say. Welcome to Jamaica, sir. Usually at these mass meetings we do what you would call scripture readings if you were in church. Because Liberty Hall certainly was created as a church dedicated towards the liberation and upliftment of black people. Not surrounding religion, but a no less spiritual movement, which is the cause of the liberation of black people. Usually we do what we call the Garvey lessons. And so before we end today, instead of spacing it out into 2 or 3 readings as is normally done, I just want to read from a speech delivered by the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey on January 1st, 1922, a century and 1 year before now. And it was on the occasion of Emancipation Day at Liberty Hall in Harlem, New York City, in the United States of America. I don't find many African Americans speak about or celebrate Emancipation Day as it was proclaimed on January 1st, 1865, I believe, by President Abraham Lincoln, 1863. But certainly in Jamaica, a few decades ago, we reinstituted it as a public holiday, Emancipation Day on August 1st. I know they speak about Juneteenth now in the United States of America, but listen carefully to the words of Garvey 101 years ago. I think it's a fitting way to close off and complement what Reverend Little just said. 59 years ago, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation declaring 400 million Negroes in this country free. Several years prior to that, Queen Victoria of England signed the Emancipation Proclamation that set at liberty hundreds of thousands of West Indian Negro slaves or enslaved. West Indian Negroes celebrate their emancipation on the first day of August of every year. The American Negroes celebrate their emancipation on the 1st of January of every year. Tonight we are here to celebrate the emancipation of the enslaved Africans in this country. We are the descendants of the men and women who suffered in this country for 250 years under that barbarous, that brutal institution known as slavery. You who have not lost trace of your history will recall the fact that over 300 years ago your forebears were taken from the great continent of Africa and brought here for the purpose of using them as chattel, as slaves. Without mercy, without any sympathy, they worked our forebears. They suffered, they bled, they died, but with their sufferings, with their blood, which they shed in their death, they had a hope that one day their posterity would be free. And we are assembled here tonight as the children of their hope. I trust each and every one of you, therefore, will realize that you have a duty which is incumbent upon you. A duty that you must perform because our forebears who suffered, who bled, who died, had hopes that are not yet completely realized. They hoped that we as their children would be free. But they also hoped that their country from whence they came would also be free to their children, their grandchildren, and great-grandchildren at some future time. It is for the freedom of that country, that motherland of ours, that 4.5 million Negroes as members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association are laboring today. This race of ours gave civilization, gave art, gave science, gave literature to the world. But it has been that way with races and nations. The one race stands out prominently in the one century or in the one age, and in another century or age it passes off the stage of action and another race takes its place. The Negro once occupied a high position in the world, scientifically, artistically, and commercially. But in the balancing of the great scale of evolution, we lost our place and someone other than ourselves occupies the stand we once held. God never intended that man should enslave his fellow. And the price of such a sin or such a violation of heaven's law must be paid by everyone. As for me, because of the blessed past, because of the history that I know, so long as there is within me the breath of life and the Spirit of God, I shall struggle on and urge others of our race to struggle on to see that justice is done to the black peoples of the world. Yes, we appreciate the sorrows of the past, and we are going to work in the present that the sorrows of our generation shall not be perpetuated in the future. On the contrary, we shall strive that by our labors succeeding generations of our own shall call us blessed, even as we call the generation of the past blessed today. And they indeed were blessed. They were blessed with a patience not yet known to man. A patience that enabled them to endure the tortures and the sufferings of slavery for over 250 years. Why? Was it because they loved slavery so? No. It was because they loved this generation more. Isn't it wonderful? Transcendent. What then are you going to do now to show your appreciation of this love? What gratitude are you going to manifest in return for what they have done for you? As for me, knowing the sufferings of my forefathers, I shall give back to Africa that liberty that she once enjoyed hundreds of years ago, before her own sons and daughters were taken from her shores and brought in chains to this Western world. No better gift can I give in honor of the memory of the love of my foreparents for me, and in gratitude of the sufferings they endured that I might be free. No grander gift can I bear to the sacred memory of the generation past than a free and redeemed Africa, a monument for all eternity and for all times. As by the action of the world and as by the conduct of all the races and nations, it is apparent that not one of them has the sense of justice, the sense of love, the sense of equity, the sense of charity that would make men happy and make God satisfied. It is apparent that it is left to the Negro to play such a part in human affairs. Therefore, we must believe that the psalmist had great hopes of this race of ours when he prophesies, princes shall come out of Egypt and Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto God. If humanity is regarded as made up of the children of God and God loves all humanity, then God is more pleased with that race that protects all humanity than with the race that outrages the children of God. And so tonight we celebrate this anniversary of our emancipation. We do it not with regret, but on the contrary, we do it with an abiding confidence, a hope and faith in ourselves and in our God. And the faith that we have is a faith that will ultimately take us back to that ancient place, that ancient position that we once occupied when Ethiopia was in her glory. Marcus Garvey. I'm going to allow for some question and answers, but the live stream will end at this point. I want to thank our viewers for tuning in. I want to thank Reverend Kobi Little for that profound and wonderful delivery. To Ms. Thompson, our host and curator at Liberty Hall, for hosting us, and to the members of the UNIA in the audience for coming out to support. Ethiopia, the land of our fathers, the land where the God loves to be, the God's love to be. Our universal Ethiopian anthem, which we normally close out. Say amen. And we end the live stream.